It's a wonder how some people think. We all have our reasons for doing the things we do. Whether our decisions are from outside influences or our own innate impulses can really say a lot about someone and what they are thinking. Remember Macbeth, who reigned in 11th century Scotland for all of 6 days, in William Shakespeare's tragedy? His own violent actions led to his downfall. What made him kill all those people, some might ask? What made him make that fatal decision to kill Duncan, a king who he once greatly respected? Some blame it on his wife, Lady Macbeth, who is reportedly a very controlling and high-maintenance partner. But what if she didn't actually exist? What if Lady Macbeth was, in fact, a figment of Macbeth's imagination?
With access to new information through archives recently discovered by historians, literary professors have created a new hypothesis about this great historical figure and the motives behind his actions. Based on these archives and knowledge about Shakespeare's tragedy, the following conclusions have been made. In William Shakespeare's account of the tragedy of Macbeth, the character of Macbeth has a split personality. Macbeth represents the dominant part of his personality and Lady Macbeth the recessive part. Their balance of power remains constant throughout the play, with Macbeth being more powerful than Lady Macbeth, but the traits of the two characters flip in the middle. Initially, Macbeth is an honorable thane with good intentions, and Lady Macbeth is power-hungry and rejects her feminine qualities. However, in the time between the murders of Duncan and Banquo, their personality traits begin to switch, and Macbeth's dominant personality is now the more evil and greedy one, whereas Lady Macbeth is guilty and remorseful. By the end of the play, Macbeth and his personality become so overbearing over his lesser traits, represented in Lady Macbeth, that she becomes insignificant. The newly discovered archives contain interviews with some of Macbeth's closest advisors and friends. The footage that we will be taking a closer look at in this episode deals with the infamous Lady Macbeth.
Welcome to tonight's special programming of Investigation Discovery. On tonight's story, we will be discussing the downfall of the once beloved warrior Macbeth. Prior to his unfortunate demise, Macbeth was lauded for his skills as a warrior and his generosity as a man. Many witnesses who were around Macbeth before his demise have very interesting insights as to how his generation could have begun. First, we will turn to Lennox to talk about the odd habits of Macbeth before and during his reign.
Welcome. Here we have Lennox, and he's seen Macbeth at his strongest and at his worst, and so now we're gonna talk to him about what Macbeth has been like. So hello Lennox, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking.
So our first question is, when did you first realize that Macbeth was changing?
Well, it all started when he was crowned Thane of Cawdor. Before that, he was the Thane of Glamis. But when he was crowned Thane of Cawdor, something seemed off about him.
And what was it that seemed off about him?
I don't know, it was weird. It was almost like he became a second person. He would sometimes talk to himself, or even argue with himself about the weirdest things. But it wasn't like he was talking with himself. He was talking to another person. I think he called her Lady Macbeth.
Lady Macbeth?
Yeah, that was it, Lady Macbeth. I find it weird because he was never married.
And don't you think it was weird that someone so powerful and respected had a split personality?
I don't know if you can judge a book by its cover.
And you said before that this happened right around the time when he became the Thane of Cawdor, but do you think there was any other point where you would notice this change?
Yes, when King Duncan was mysteriously murdered.
So there's actually been some controversy surrounding the death of Duncan. So what are your thoughts on that?
I refuse to believe that Macbeth would do such a heinous act. He was the paragon of a loyal and honorable thane. He would always say stuff about how a good man is someone who is a good thane and warrior. He would always say that they should represent honor, chivalry, and devotion to their king. However, one night I overheard one of his episodes. He was arguing with himself about being a man. While he would occasionally follow through with his old ideals, I heard him talk of something else.
And what was that?
He was talking about being a man and how being a man is about following through with your ambitions. It's like there was this smaller part that was just sounded evil. I feel like Macbeth was coerced by himself to kill Duncan.
Very interesting. All right, thank you very much, Lennox, for speaking with us.
What if Lennox had been right, and Macbeth really did have an alternate personality, whom he called Lady Macbeth? This would support the fact that the change inside Macbeth when he discovers that he is the Thane of Cawdor had to do with the introduction of the character Lady Macbeth. It is only after he discovers his new title that he begins to talk to the character he calls Lady Macbeth. Initially, Macbeth is able to control and suppress the evil thoughts and impulses of the Lady Macbeth side of his personality. Taking a deeper look at Macbeth's change in dominant personality and his actions should reveal the truth about Macbeth and his so-called wife, Lady Macbeth. Let's take another look at the archives to shed light on the development of Macbeth's character.
Welcome back. We just heard from Lennox, who had been close to Macbeth for a lot of his life. However, we are now here with Macbeth's doctor, who was with him until his final days.
Hello, Doctor. Thank you for meeting with us today.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
So, what is your relation to Macbeth?
Well, he was actually referred to me by a servant of his who noticed some unusual behavior.
Unusual behavior? What kind?
I think he first started to exhibit this strange behavior at his first banquet as king. He was absent for much of the beginning of the night, leaving his guests alone, which was really strange. When he came back, he just stood there around the table while there was an empty seat in front of him. He claimed that the table was full, and as the dinner progressed, he seemed to switch back and forth from a chivalrous knight that reminded me of Duncan to a paranoid man who spoke of blood and murder. Anyway, the evening was cut short when he apologized for being sick and asked his guests to leave. One of his servants mentioned this illness to me, which is how I became acquainted with him.
You did mention that this was the first instance where strange behavior had occurred, yes? Did his demeanor begin to worsen?
Certainly, yes.
But have you seen any of this strange behavior firsthand?
Well, I did see someone, I don't know who, get up in the middle of the night to go vigorously wash their hands. Although I can't prove it, I think it was Macbeth.
What is so strange about someone washing their hands?
I think he was sleeping, washing his hands subconsciously. He was mumbling something about getting the blood off.
Well, Doctor, that is strange. Why do you think it was Macbeth? Couldn't it have been someone else?
The light in his room was on, and it's hard to mistake the body outline. It just looked like him, but I never saw the man's face.
Thank you for your time, Doctor.
My pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to this special episode on Investigation Discovery, where we spoke to some guests about the life and death of the late King Macbeth and were able to shed some light on his actions. We'll see you next week, where we will talk to some local farmers about the negative effects of barbarian raids on potato yields.
This interview exemplifies the complete transformation of Macbeth's character. Instead of being the chivalrous warrior that he once was, he is corrupt and evil. Lady Macbeth's character is hardly mentioned at this point in the play. Her death, which goes mostly unnoticed, represents the complete disappearance of any positive traits in Macbeth's personality. After reviewing these archives in William Shakespeare's play, the conclusion that Lady Macbeth is not real and is simply a figment of Macbeth's imagination can be made with certainty. It is quite clear that there is a direct correlation between the introduction of the character Lady Macbeth and Macbeth's first poisonous thoughts about becoming king. Additionally, the doctor's account of Lady Macbeth desperately trying to wash her guilt away, and later, the insignificance of her death, both show that the good side of Macbeth dies and all that is left is evil and corruption. This information supports the idea that Lady Macbeth is one part of Macbeth's split personality that opposes his governing characteristics.